All right, so we are on, Ben, and I'm super excited about having you on our stage. We always try to bring great thought leaders in the industry, and I love just jamming around SEO and content and things and related things. And today our webinar about explosive growth, like great title, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are going to be very curious about how can we use SEO for explosive growth. So Ben, thank you from Nat 43. Again, Ben is very well known in the SEO industry, and his agency, which is more of a boutique kind of SEO agency, is very well known in Canada and of course in the US as well. So we are lucky to have Ben today talking about how to leverage SEO for growing your business. Ben, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me on, Carlos. Pleasure to speak to you. Pleasure to be here in front of the audience, and looking forward to getting into the topic.
Awesome. Housekeeping, people can just, send questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. I'm not a big stickler about it. And I'll be doing this webinar a little bit more dynamic. So I'm going to be not necessarily interrupting, but interacting with Ben and asking some questions. So feel free to pop up your questions at any time. There will be a recording, so we'll send it after the webinar is done. And again, I'm your host, Carlos Mesa, CEO of Crowd Content. We help companies create great content at a scale. So with no further ado, Ben, the stage is up to yours. So let's look at your screen.
Perfect. Let me just share this. Let me know. Are you able to see that all right?
Yeah, we're in business.
Okay, perfect. So I put together a few slides to kind of help guide our conversation today. But I mean, as people who follow the SEO space know, it's been an insane last year. So I'm going to go over some conversation points that really fit into how we're going to get to the bottom of building that SEO-driven content strategy, right? So first off, let me just jump into this. As you know, Carlos talked about today, I'm going to go into these in no particular order. I kind of jump around a little bit here, just going into some key topics, but I will be actually diving into a content analysis in this with you, Carlos, like going into our process to not only how we look at like SEO in general, but more so specifically when we actually are looking at and auditing a site or checking out our growth plan. How do we actually audit the content on that site, and what's our process for building a content strategy that we can help execute? Going into a little bit, I mean, we have to talk about a little bit recently in especially the last 4 months, and I'll go into some of these points. There's been a lot of updates on Google's end, and this does affect how we're building, optimizing, and really generating content moving forward. And then I'm going to go into a few different things about our content strategy and topical authority, clustering, all that kind of stuff. So with
So
no
Ben,
further,
so when people walk away from this webinar, what do you think they will take away with them?
the biggest thing I think you're going to walk away from here is just saying, I need to take a step back and look at my content inventory and how we're performing, and then get strategic with your action. It's not about that next one piece. It's about taking a step out and looking how Google is perceiving your website. That's the biggest thing, is like really looking at it as a big picture of your content strategy, not just executing content.
Awesome. All right, well, let's hear it.
Yeah, so kind of going into falling back on all those changes. I know I put this post up not too long ago. There was some core updates. We had the helpful content update, the spam update. Google has just been, in my opinion, like with this wave of AI content, they've been like backtracking and trying to find ways to shore up their defenses. Like essentially, they know that a lot of content is coming at them, and people are getting smarter with how they use AI. They're getting smarter with how they're integrating it into their process. And of course, tools are being integrated and all that kind of stuff. But at the core of it, they're still going to reward helpful, strongly written, and like actual subject matter expert proven content. And some of these things, if you read between the lines with Google, that's some of the most important part, right? Like they'll put out their notices, and you'll see a lot of the SEO influencers or content influencers will dive into it and give their takes. And that's where I get some of my like most insightful things following, I mean, definitely some people you've had on your webinar recently, Carlos, but following some of these influencers and being like, hey, here's what was said. How are we seeing this impact sites? And then moving from there. So a couple quick insights I thought I'd kind of poke around at is, of course, at the heart of it, we're seeing eat signals at the front and center. But what does that really mean? Anyone who really has been focusing on these would know like EEAT, experience, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, all that good stuff. That is the broad term, but we're looking at how do you demonstrate that? Well, what Google's been showing us recently is some things like making sure your author is real and associated to it. So author, bylines, all that kind of stuff. Another thing we're talking about when we're talking about EAT is, okay, having subject matter experts integrated into the content creation process. So it's worth investing that extra bit into content to make sure you have the right voice that actually backs the content, because Google is showing that that is an important factor. Some tactics being reviewed by, some tactics being, having them actually write the content, but different ways. Either way, that subject matter expert is getting a voice inside that content. We've also seen a couple other things like, the whole blow up of Reddit. I don't know if you've been following that whole saga. I'm sure, Carlos, it's been in your circle a little bit, but one thing that you can kind of extract from that, and I'm seeing this across multiple content types, is this idea of multiple contributors on a piece. In the last little couple of years, it's always been a factor that we would like label it a different way in the SEO space, like guest posting, guest contributors, backlinking, all these different things, right? But at the end of the day, Google is showing it's rewarding having people upvoting, as Reddit will do, or multiple contributors agreeing on a topic, disagreeing, and posting their points of view. So that user-generated content or that subject matter integrated content is being rewarded. So those are just a couple of snippets of some things. But when I think about that, like, what does it mean?
Before we move on, Ben, I just had a comment or question really to you.
Absolutely.
What it comes down to, and Google keeps saying the same, and even they say we keep saying the same, is create great content. But I feel like we have to repeat ourselves so many times. And, all thought leaders keep saying, just create great content. And everybody wants kind of that little magic bullet, or only if I do this or that. Why do you think is that? Why do you think like us content marketers or SEOs have to keep repeating ourselves? Like, you just have to create great content. And why is their message not resonating with people? Or why do you think that is?
No, that's a great question. I have a feeling that at a stakeholder decision-making process, it's difficult to attach value to that content investment. Like, why do you only need $50 to create this, but you're asking me now that you need $500 to create this? And that really traditionally has come back to SEOs and content marketers in general have kind of not had to be like, not that they're hiding it or it's not transparent, but they haven't had to explain because the results speak for themselves. Well, what this makes you evaluate is it makes you kind of evaluate in the investment into this helpful content. Oh, it's going to cost this much to create great content. What's the return? And I think in the past, it was a lot harder for us to associate that return in that content investment. But with this kind of strategy where you're building it from, we know people are looking for this, we know it's useful for our audience, and this is going to potentially generate this many leads, there is a return on that content investment. So I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to that, like, why do you need so much budget and resources to build content? Because it pays for itself is kind of the end answer, but we as marketers have to reiterate that quite a bit.
Yeah, so there is still a lot of education that needs to happen at the executive level to justify the ROI, which I think is justifiable. But another way to see it, or at least this is how I would explain to somebody, like, is look, like going to the gym or getting a cheap pill. All right, like we all want the cheap pill that is gonna make us magical, but the only results, the real results, are if you go to the gym for a year. Takes work, takes money, takes effort, but it's totally worth it and rewarding. But we all want to be skinny and handsome and good looking overnight. So I think it's just getting through that, right? Like getting through that. into our minds that we need to put the effort, we need to put the work. Google keeps telling us that, and you know, we keep
100%.
looking for shortcuts. But I think now is harder than ever to get those shortcuts. I remember the times when you could brute force yourself into rankings, right? Like, okay, let's just post as much content as we can. But now that's no longer a possibility. But anyway,
And they forget to tell you about the symptoms on that little pill you took, right? And when competition wasn't there and you could enter a niche or a space and no one else was writing content, you might be able to get into it. But nowadays, some of those symptoms that come with that little weight loss pill they're getting like really highlighted.
yeah, and last point on UGC or user generated content. Actually, I don't know if you saw, but Google just updated their quality rating guidelines where they put a little bit more comment around UGC, telling the quality raters, hey, when you see things that are not really helpful or that are combative or like, those kind of toxic forums where there's
Yeah.
a lot of insults and things that are not helpful. So Google, I think, is trying to get it right. It's just going to take a while because still surfacing a lot of trash every now and then. But I think the question or the big thing for us SEOs and content marketers is going to be, okay, how can we leverage user generated content? So anyway, I'll let you get back to your flow.
Before I jump back into it, I'm just going to touch on that comment because it's really interesting, right? It just kind of brings up that point of they're showing their defenses. So they're telling you, hey, they're rewarding Reddit. And then they're seeing, oh my gosh, here's all this backlash from all these terrible posts that shouldn't be ranking. We need to figure out how to fix this. So then they're saying, okay, we need a quality rating, guide. Okay. And then when that comes out, they're just putting update after update and it's exhausting for an SEO. But this is I'm going to bring us back down a little bit too. So there's a lot of broad things changing in the industry. We know this, and it's important to follow that. If you can get ahead of some of those creative tactics, that's huge. I'm going to come back to though are some of our SEO pillars. And I really do want to focus on the content strategy side of this. That's what I've built out for the following. But I just talk about kind of the three, like technical, important, because you're not going to realize the gains of your content investment if you don't have to crawl the website. There's so many little things I won't even go into on the technical that just unlocks the ability of your content. And authority, kind of the same thing. Now, authority can have different elements of it where it's either like link building or digital PR. But at the end of the day, does Google trust this content for you? And there's tactics around that. But in terms of the content strategy side, this is really what I want to dive into because that's the third pillar here, and that's what we're going to go into. So we go through this process when we onboard a brand, and in that kind of middle section, I've really highlighted the analysis side of it. We're going to dive, and I'm going to take you through this in a second. Nowadays, kind of touching back on that point earlier about the the little weight loss pill. With these recent helpful content updates, it's been shown and it's in their guidelines that it is a negative qualifier. So if you have bad content or you have content that you've written in the past that needs updating, or you don't have any strategy or topical authority in your content, all these different things are going to be weighing factors. There's theories of it being a site score and whatnot, but nonetheless, what it is showing is sites that have a bunch of bad content can be penalized, or maybe if not penalized, just deranked in some sense, because penalized is a pretty strong word. So we need to think about your content as a whole. So the way we kind of approach this is we look at your entire content inventory and audit. So let's pull everything from not only from your Google Analytics and Google Search Console, see how your actual website's performing, your own data. What are we seeing from your own performance? You can pull third party, you're using SEMrush or using Ahrefs, or a multitude of tools. And we actually put all that data together and look at, okay, we need to analyze this before we go into the planning and prioritization, before we go into the content creation, and before we go into optimizing. We need to get a good picture of it. So let's look at that content inventory side first. I added this in here because we're not just building content, we're building content with long-term value. And this goes back to that whole stakeholder conversation. So this is just like a graph with and I just kind of put some numbers here quickly for demonstration purposes. but like position 1 versus 2 versus 3. And it is changing with knowledge graphs and SERPs and all sorts of SGE changes that are coming up. But at the end of the day, there's still value at the position. And once we get a clear picture of how that generated result is rolled out post beta, we can think about that. But for now, in most niches, you can still see a pretty strong click-through rate from 1 to 2 to 3, and then kind of onward from there. What kind of conversions are you getting from your content? What kind of sales? If you have an e-commerce company or a lead gen company, it's good for us. The reason I wanted to highlight this is to think about what kind of striking distance quick wins are there? What kind of long-term wins should you go after? And you need to be thinking about your conversions and your sales when you're thinking about this, not just your rankings and traffic. That's kind of the point of this. So this is a little bit of a complicated slide, but I'm going to kind of take a second to break this down because it's definitely a lot. What we're looking at here is we're looking at your keyword performance across each of these different platforms. So when we're doing our content audit, we are saying, okay, here's a keyword that you're ranking for. Here's the respective results from Ahrefs, from Google Search Console, from Google Analytics. We're looking and comparing the data of each page or each keyword in this case, and seeing like, okay, what are all these multiple data sources saying for it? So when we take a look at this kind of broader picture of things, we're trying to get a good understanding. We look at macro level insights. Okay, first of all, do you have any performance? Are there pages are there keywords on page 1? Do you have keywords that you're trying to rank for on page 1, or do you have keywords that you've just been being pulled from somewhere on your site? We're trying to get like a macro level insight of your entire keyword map. And what we do is we can compare these results with your website crawl, like we do from Screaming Frog, and we can say, okay, here's all your performance, and here's the keywords you're ranking for, the respective traffic, the respective keyword volumes, and positioning. Versus, okay, here's your website, and these are the pages you have on your site and how they're interlinked and how they're really established on your topical authority and or not topical authority, but on your information architecture and your URL structure. Like, where are they on your website? And this is where we get a lot of insights. So kind of back to the whole the point of this is like the webinar in general is, where's that SEO growth really come from? It comes from understanding a picture of how you're performing and then building a plan of how to optimize that content to get there. So you have a picture at this point. And this is really important because a lot of times people will come to us with like, hey, we have these keywords you want to rank for. And they don't really have a clear picture of what their performance is. They might know one page. If we have this page we've built that kind of ranks for this, but all of their other sub pages and different pages they've built in the past, like that page they built 3 years ago that they launched and they forgot about and they haven't updated in 3 years, it's still performing on the second page. And it's like, okay, well, why don't we update that piece of content and we can actually take a look at from there, right? So it reminds you when you look at the performance to actually take a step back and say, what does Google see? What does my data tell me? And then how should I act?
Yeah, so what basically you're saying is really you need to know where you're standing right now, right? What is your current performance?
Yeah.
And that's, I think there's a way that's very helpful for a company that has been around for a while or has a strong presence. How about a company that's just starting and wants to start their SEO push, or they're finally investing in SEO? So how they should, because their content audit wouldn't say much, right?
That's a great point. So I guess there's two different scenarios here. One, they're starting full from scratch. They are like, this is like they have a 5-page website and they're like, you know what, I want to invest in the channel. At that point, it actually starts with keyword research. So we're not so much worried about performance because, like you said, there is none. But let's think about, what do you want to rank for your business? Let's think about finding out your seed keywords. And I'll actually move forward because this answers the question a little bit more. 1 second, I'll come back to this. What are all the different topics that you want to rank for as a business? And what are the surrounding topics around them? So this is where we look at, topic clusters. So say, for example, you sell pet food. well, what kind of pets do you sell for? Dog food, cat food, chick, and do you have certain types of food? Is it raw food versus kibble or something like that? What are the different areas in your business? And then building clusters around that. So do keyword research. You find your main pillars and your content pillars through content volume. So if you give an SEO all of those, like I sell dog food and cat food, that's their job to look and say, what are all the different keywords? And then build out a topical structure and say, well, here's where all the opportunity is. Here's where all the search volume is, what people are looking for. They not only look for the best dog food, but they also look for things like, can I change my dog's food? Or what's the problem with, how often should I feed my dog? Or, any sort of roadblock. You're really trying to solve their problems in that keyword research. So instead of starting with performance, you start with keyword research instead.
Yeah. So here's a relevant question from the audience.
Yeah.
So Ian is helping. One thing that's interesting to me is how people are saying that we shouldn't or can't write basic content on topics that SGE and AI can do well. But in my opinion, it's still necessary to cover the basics in order to help demonstrate your depth of knowledge and establish EEAT before you try and go down the long tail. What's your take on that?
That's actually a great question. So what we typically do, we use a bottom of the funnel up approach. So to Ian's point, what is your main subject matter expertise that you're trying to demonstrate? What's your money page? What's your most helpful piece of content? Invest the time, invest the effort. Like you can still do some early keyword research and say like, hey, I'm going to go after this piece of content. Get that written, get that ranking, and then you can roll out supporting content that feeds into that and interlink, making sure you're doing a proper interlinking strategy there to say like, you can always update that first piece of content and reattach a new piece of content you create, right? But to that point, build that really authoritative and important money page first, and then your sub pages that you have in that cluster, you can roll those out 2 a month, 3 a month, or 1 a month, depending on like the size of the cluster. And those consistent signals will say to Google, I'm writing about this, I'm actively researching this, and I'm a relevant time relevant subject matter person who can actually get this content to my audience, right? So build the money page first, and then kind of roll out subsequent topics.
Yeah, well, how I would see it, Ben and Ian, is that you should still write, because if you want that topical authority and demonstrate that you can cover the topic broadly, I would still do some investment on your kind of basic top of the funnel, more informative pages, because they're supporting your overall strategy. Maybe you are not going to put all of your effort into those pages, but they're kind of supporting, let's say, supporting pages. And also the moment that you have somebody in your site, they might go to that page, right? They're not going to go necessarily just straight from Google, but they can go when they're doing a navigation through your overall site. So it's not necessarily lost content, right? Because they're going to be all helping each other. And last but not least, remember that SGE, AI, and all these things will continue to feed of new content all the time. So, and I think I just recently saw that commentary with SGE is actually putting links. It's still kind of summarizing the answer, providing that kind of very high level piece of information, but it's still kind of surfacing some of the links where it's taking the information from. So you might have a chance still to rank or have a link showing for that content. So I think it is worth covering some of those pages as well.
I absolutely agree. Like Google's kind of shown that it has this topical coverage, and if you're feeding into it, it's still helping you rank. So I'm going to touch back on, let's go back here. Okay, so after you've done your analysis and you've done your keyword research exercise, either one, sometimes they come together, right? This is where it's important we do a prioritization exercise. So look at your top 50 performing. Now, it depends on the number of pages on your site. Like you could look at top 10. It's irrelevant the size and volume of it. But make sure you're prioritizing your kind of money pages or your top ranked or top volume pages. So what pages have the most opportunity for you If you have a piece of content that's on page 2 that has really high volume that you think you can go after, it's important to prioritize that content, either rewriting it or building topics around it to support it, or changing it and actually optimizing. Like, does it need to have a title change? Does it need to have maybe having a guest collaborator come in and add something to the piece? There's lots of different ways that you can change it, but at the end of the day, at the very least, you can go in and make sure on page SEO fundamentals are there, keyword like heading structure and all that stuff. The fundamentals still matter throughout all of this. That's something that people sometimes, like, there's just so many creative ideas coming out there, but the SEOs who are executing right now on a monthly basis, we still get results from pretty basic implementations, making sure that the keywords in the title, making sure there's a table of contents, making sure that there's heading structures, and then the images and all, like, little things like that that are still going to get you results. Now, they're not the end all and be all. You can't have bad content and just optimize it, but you can still get some results there. So when we do this, we make a prioritizing exercise and we say, okay, here's our list of content. Here's our 10, 50, 100 pieces of content. Now we're going to work through these and we're going to work on updating. And this is where, like, Carlos, we would work together on the content, either update or newly written process of, say, like, we need 10 new pieces of content in this topic because we're missing that in this whole map here, right? So from here, it's more of a content production process, but you built it from a place of performance. You said, okay, here's where the keyword research is, here's where our website is, and here's where we need to go. And you can see that and actually start building content towards the plan. And it's kind of important at this point to actually understand that now you know you're building content that is continuously and iteratively adding more value to your website. Each piece you optimize is an additional thing. People often say, like, SEO takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time because it takes time to build content, good content, and it takes time to do major dev updates like migrating a website or something like that. There's usually building blocks that kind of stack to get the results you need. And don't be intimidated by that 100 piece of content list. It's everyone's going to get you value, and keep working on it with your content production team, making sure, like, it's following that SEO plan because you've outlined the value already, right? So we typically have that in a sheet, but yeah, sorry.
I want to make a comment there. So I heard, I cannot claim this is mine. So I heard in a conference, a great analogy is a basketball analogy. And it's like, compare this to, shooting under the hoop and shooting 3-pointers.
Mm-hmm.
So optimizing content that is either position 4 to 12 can give, is kind of easier, right? Might not get you a huge boost, but, it's like shooting under hoop. Now, trying to rank for a brand new keyword in page 1, that's your 3-pointer, right? There might be a huge boost in traffic, but it's much harder. So there's much risk. So I think one of the things that I like to suggest clients is, like, hey, focus on upgrading, not only updating, because I think there's also a sort of nuance in those two things. Not only updating, but upgrading your content that has a good that is already ranking. But it might be, just by you getting a few positions up, you're going to have a huge boost with not the amount of effort that takes to rank for a brand new cluster or a brand new keyword. So the other thing about upgrading and updating, that's the other thing. Like, just change the date of your content. Is not updating, right?
Sometimes it's that easy.
You need to add something new. You need to add new information. One of the things that we do for briefs for writers and content creators is, like, there's a section that we call differentiation. So how are you going to differentiate this piece of content to what there is already out there? And we give them instructions to differentiate that content when we are upgrading content and when we are creating new content. So advice to people is, like, hey, when you're looking, okay, we want to upgrade this content because what is really you're going to bring new to the table to make it a fresh piece of content and help you boost your position. So does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah, that does. And kind of when you're doing that upgrading part, a lot of SEOs will, there's so many tools out there that help with optimization, right? Sometimes you can get stuck in the kind of cycle of looking what's ranking and what's working right now, and just thinking about replicating what's there. Oh, the person who's in first position has a top 20 list. I should build a top 21 list. There's a big difference between knowing what that audience wants. And if you really think about it, when you're doing that upgrading process, use the tools, use the data. We definitely do, but it's not a matter of just replicating what's there. It's a matter of what does that user want? How can we provide the most value to them? And to that point earlier, where you talk about kind of the free throw or the hook shot versus the 3-pointer, if you update your money content and it's sitting in position 8, and then you're going through and you're doing your layups and your hook shots and you're getting your small wins, Google is going to see that you're becoming more relevant in the space. And if you're properly connecting those two topics, your 3-pointer is going to get just that much stronger, because they're going to see that, okay, you have this coverage. Now I might rank this, and people are staying on my website. They're buying my product. They're giving signals to Google that Google did a good job showing ranking my website. Now I might give them a chance on that 3-point shot.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So the last kind of thing I had here after top content clusters and pillars was, and this is like, I've seen this in a few different ways, but essentially extending the value of your content. This is something we've been focusing on a lot recently. It's like, okay, how can you repurpose your content across your channels? And this is where AI and a lot of these tools that can help you kind of map out your content distribution a little more effectively can come into play. Like if you're going to invest that time into that money SEO piece, the value doesn't have to stop with SEO. Okay, is there a way I can build a YouTube video out of this? How am I using this on my socials? Sometimes we can get tied up in, is this a ranking factor? Like, is posting your blog on your social media a ranking factor going to get me a better rank? Maybe it's not tied 1-to-1, but at the end of the day, Google does reward social signals. Google does reward when content has good time on site and all these different other factors. So if you can take the value of that piece of content that you've invested into and redistribute it in other areas, your email marketing strategy, it's important. And maybe this is where it could just be rewriting for that different audience or platform, but you've already built that core piece. So make sure you're using it kind of across your whole channel. So you don't have to think of it of just for that blog. How are you using it kind of in other areas of your business is something often overlooked.
Yeah, so and this is how I think about it. I think part of the challenge as well is that SEO has become so technical, and I think for a while SEO has gone into a rabbit hole, just focusing too much on the technicality of it, and then create content for SEO, which I think is a wrong approach. I think people should create content for their audiences and then use SEO as a distribution channel and optimize for a distribution channel. But you should be creating this, what I call raw content. Meaning there's a message that you want to put out there. There is something that you have to talk about, something that is interesting, something that is near and dear to your heart, something that is near and dear to your business. Then you can create that messaging. And then from that, you can repurpose it for the different channels. Okay, so this is how we're going to use that message in SEO, how we're going to use that message in YouTube, or how we're going to use it in our newsletter. Something that we do internally here. So we take these webinars and then we repurpose them and then create a blog post out of them. Then we create clips and then put it in short form for snippets of tidbits of information. We do the same. We also record a newsletter, which we turn into a podcast. We will turn into also some social posting. And this is because we want all of our content to work together, right? All these things are helping each other to create authority, and also, well, at the end of the day, you're giving more to your audience, right? This is also the name of the game in content marketing. And content marketing is you're giving to your audience, so you can also earn the right to ask for the business later on when people are ready to give you the business.
100%. And I think it was Jeff from Market Muse who was saying something along the lines of like SEO, like building SEO content is dead. I won't quote it exactly, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but like just building those old SEO articles from like 10 years ago where you're focusing on a keyword and spinning up to 500 words, like that practice is gone. You have to think, like you're kind of saying, think about your content strategy, think about what's the message, and then it gets translated to a blog that can rank on Google, right? So that's an important distinction.
Beautiful.
So that's it for the slides I had put together today. I'm not sure if you had any kind of questions or thoughts that you also wanted to touch on today, but I'm happy to kind of jump into some other
So,
points too.
Jenny is asking us,
Yeah.
how often should you be updating those dates? Is every 2 years sufficient, or making small touches to that top performing content? From a capacity standpoint, is it better to focus on the lower performing, making small updates to the top performers, or spreading that evenly?
I think there's two questions there. I'll answer the first one on like timing first. I mean, unfortunately, it does depend on your space. Like, how important is having the most recent content? Like, if you're in some sort of news or journalistic space, or if it's something where a lot of things have changed in your industry over 2 years, that does matter. So, like, you might think of riding a bike. Riding a bike might not have changed much in the last 3 years. Realistically, if it's equipment about reviews though on how to actually what's the best new handlebar for that bike, then that's something that there's probably new technology that's been released. So it kind of does matter on your niche. But in terms of like, we usually look every 3 to 6 months, we'll take a look back and see like what is our priority content that we can look at updating. So try not, you can't get too in, like if you're doing it every month, that could be a little much, but every 3 to 6 months, we'll kind of do a look back there.
Yeah, I think there's many ways to look at this, but also, and I think this is a concept that I was discussing with your partner Ben, your partner Peter, about content maintenance. Because
Yeah.
okay, we are looking at what we do, but we should all be looking at what our competitors are doing, or
Mhm.
especially the pages that we're ranking for, right? So that might also dictate how often you
Yep.
need to upgrade, because they're also trying to outcompete us all the time. So
100%.
if we're in position one or position two or any of the top three, there is a bunch of people trying to get us out of there. So we
Yep.
need to look, okay, what are others, at least the ones that are closer to my position, doing? So I have also to play defense, because it's not only to play attack, it's also to play defense with your content. One of the things is that we internally focus a lot is, okay, where are we ranking top one? What
Yep.
do we need to do to keep that ranking, right? Because okay, we cannot go further than position one, right? Oh well, we can
Yep.
go to position zero and snippets and all that stuff, but different discussion. But everybody is trying. We have a target on our back because everybody else is trying to get to that position one. So we need to monitor what are they doing so we can stay ahead of that game. So I think to your question, Jenny, it all depends on resources, right? And again, can you make an analysis of or a scenario analysis? Okay, what would it mean for me if I lose this position in this particular piece of content, right? Let's say your money pages and the one or the content is generating the most traffic.
Mhm.
What it would cost? What it would cost me to upgrade that, or what would be the ROI of creating a new piece of content, and getting it to rank, right? Like it needs to be a data-driven analysis, right? And how much resources do I have? How much is going to cost me? Because upgrading your content might be a little bit more cost efficient than just
Mhm.
creating a brand new piece of content, right? So I think you should always be looking at every content is going to be produced from a lens of, okay, what is going to be up, or like there should be a bucket for upgrading or maintenance, and there should be a bucket for new, right? And
Mhm.
depending on your position, on how is the overall performance of your site, you can change the buckets, right? If you're being feeling that your competitors are really attacking some of those positions, maybe you should focus for a while on upgrading that content just to defend, like playing defense. And maybe when there's opportunities, then you might be focusing on offense, right? Or maybe there's a new product that you're launching or something that you need to kind of also help boost. But there's not a one size fits all, but you should always be thinking about both, right? Not just
Yep.
one thing at a time. That at least that'll be my take on that.
Yeah, and like having your content in a calendar with like a full roadmap of what you're building gives you that ability to kind of go back and reorganize when you're going to look back at it. And I completely agree with everything you said. Like understanding where the best resources are, what your competitors are doing, what's performing. Like if something isn't out of position one or two, and you have something that you can invest time into now that will get you more of a return, then it might be time. But if you have some resources and you're seeing that your competitors are doing some extra things, maybe you need to look back at that piece of content. So yeah, there's no one size fits all on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and just to put you on the spot a little bit, Ben. So, the title of the webinar is Explosive Growth. Do you have any examples, or can you tell us about any case where you have seen that explosive growth by really following the steps that you outline here?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the explosive growth examples and kind of I would reference would be bigger websites that have a large amount of content and we're missing some very critical pieces of analysis. So there's two ways to look at it. One, the explosive growth can come in that year two if you're building from scratch. Like you're building, you're going to see that kind of like SEO curve. You've seen the hockey stick or whatever way it's defined on LinkedIn nowadays. That each time is different, but that growth comes from when it compounds and your money keyword hits. So it's not that it's like explosive growth the next day or the next month when you start writing content, when you're starting from scratch. That's just not going to happen. It could be a little bit quicker than 1 year, but at the end of the day, that growth happens when all of this comes together and those money keywords start getting boosted by all of that roadmap that you built over that time period. But where we've seen some really big gains is when we have a blog post with thousands of pages and you're seeing that there's just no actual topical authority structure. None of the blog posts are interlinking. So we actually did have one of them with one of our polar expedition clients who does different Antarctica travels, Arctic travels. They had all these amazing blog posts that were sitting like hundreds and hundreds of blog posts that were sitting in like mid-level ranking positions. And once we decided to start categorizing these and then filling them into photography versus wildlife versus Arctic versus like you have your different categories, subcategories, interlinking it and really making it cohesive, we actually were able to launch that in like a shorter period of time so that when all of that kind of got indexed and Google saw that we were structuring their site properly, it was more of an audit and an implementation. And we had some huge gains on that. Like I think it was like 300 something percent gains of traffic. They were doing like 20, 30,000 on that blog a month, and they were up in the hundreds after this. So it was a huge increase, thousands, hundreds of thousands, I'd say. But yeah, definitely in terms of the building, it's kind of a compounding when you start growing. And then if you have a lot of pages, the amount of growth you can see by taking a look at your performance and doing this analysis is really where it can be a little bit faster of that explosive growth.
Yeah, we also have some examples around just linking. We had this particular one blog post in our site where a lot of the traffic was going there, but it wasn't necessarily a money page. It was a knowledge page, right? Like just giving information to our audience. And we just made some changes and now has become a really good lead magnet by us just upgrading that, just looking at that opportunity. Okay, we have a lot of traffic, a lot of eyeballs here. What should we do? And also helping that traffic to generate traffic for other pages in the site. So that has been helpful. We also got a recent client who wrote a piece for them and they got to position 1 in 45 days.
Wow.
Yeah. And okay, so to be fair, they have a lot of authority, but it was a very well written piece of content, right? There was a lot of effort put into it, right? So they totally answered the question. So there is ways, if you have authority and you already have like good presence out there, if you really put an exceptional piece of content, there's a chance that you might be ranking for that particular keyword in position 1 very fast. If you have already, done all these work, right? There is no free lunch for anybody just showing up with, okay, I want to start my site and then showing in position first overnight. But if you already, which I believe most of the people in this audience already probably have some presence, there is opportunities to get some explosive growth. The last example that I would bring around using SEO is if there is any recent topics where there is a lot of interest in your industry, this is more like news-like stuff, but it's not journalism, day-to-day journalism. So we were able to rank first for one of the core updates for Google. So I think in last year's May update, we created such a thorough, like 3,000 word analysis of the update. Yeah, it took us like a week to to put it together. But we were able
It's
to
gonna
rank
take
first
time.
for a while, just for Google's May update, right? Well, now that's gonna be harder because they make an update like every week. So,
Yeah.
but we were in that position at least for 2-3 months. But not only we got that traffic, but also we built a lot of authority with our audience. So there are many ways, and I think one is upgrading your content. Others like doing those three pointer shots with, but you have to do a lot of the work there. And the other thing is just having the fundamentals. I think I wanted to get your take on this, Ben, but I feel like I don't know if it is technical SEO has lost importance, but not really lost importance. It's just has become such a table stakes things that it's not going to give you an
Yeah.
advantage anymore. So before it was an advantage, now it's more like, okay, if you don't have it, you're not going to be able to rank it. What do you think about that?
Um, you know, so that depends a little bit. We've come across a lot of, I agree with you in terms of growing brands and like, newer brands. If you're creating the last 5, 10 years, it's table stakes. You gotta bite the bullet and make sure you're doing it well. But you need to have the content and technical is just, we're assuming you're doing that. Where it is a little bit more like a little different is when, like, for example, even today I was talking to a brand that's 30 years old and they have some great performance on the first page of Google based on their authority and their content that they've written over 30 years. And you look at it and you're like, none of this is optimized content. Like you're like, this is like thin content, or there's no breadcrumbs, there's no canonicals, there's no nothing, just whatever little thing. You're like, how is this doing well? I think for those brands, if they want to stay where they are, they need to invest in technical. But at the end of the day, for any of the new brands, you're right. It's just like table stakes.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to give you an edge anymore. It's just like
Yeah,
if you don't have it,
exactly.
you're missing out. You're missing a huge opportunity, and it's probably getting on your way. The other thing is with backlinks. Again, I don't think they have lost the importance. It's just I think that has changed dramatically, right?
Mhm.
And it's more about like really getting high quality links, and it's now really I heard the term being used more often now is digital PR, which is
Yep.
really getting like true great links. It's not just blasting everybody to see if you can get some links. It's like doing a truly concerted effort to get these really high quality links, and you need to also earn the link, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to come in with really great content. So I don't know. I want to hear your take on that.
I mean, there's a place for backlinking and guest posts and all that. I do think it's important as a signal. So when you build strong content, you can send those signals still, and they do help. But to your point, nowadays brands are, it's almost like table stakes to have a small backlinking budget, but then it's, if you really want to be competitive in a competitive space, that's where you need to be a little more creative with your PR, because you're not going to be able to generate as many links at cost as you will if you bring them to your content. So if you invest into building content like a research study, and then you use that in a PR piece, so you've invested in this piece of content, you've actually invested into the story itself, the backlinks will come. And from there, you're going for like quality domain authority, like real publishers picking you up, and you can really get some huge value from it, as opposed to buying a high DA link where it's gonna be really expensive and it doesn't have the same kind of widespread brand authority to it, or brand value to it. So there's still a place for backlinking. We still leverage it, but I'm finding it more and more important to get creative with that digital PR and think about, okay, how are we going to actually generate real buzz on this piece that we've invested into?
Okay, that's fair. So we have a question from the audience from Kim Fortin saying, "I noticed that you both have a search bar on your blog. How do you leverage that SEO wise?"
Um, to be honest, I don't really leverage it on our blog very much. I probably should do it more. It's not a huge factor. You can actually, the way I would see it there from how I leverage it is, if you look at what search terms people are looking for, that can help identify some things that they're finding they need on your site. So it's not so much that it's like a factor in ranking, it's more a factor in ideation and being like, hey, what do my users actually look for and what content should I build? That's probably the number one way I would use it.
That's awesome. And look, it just gave me an idea because I was gonna say I don't think we leverage. We are using it just for user experience, right?
Mhm.
Okay, let's because we have I think over 1,000 blocks. So
Yeah.
for people to find him is going to be very hard. So, but that's a great idea. If you can, get the data from your search bar and see, okay, what are they, where are they landing and what are they looking next? Then that can give you an idea of, okay, what's their journey, right? And maybe look for patterns. Maybe they're looking for something else and give you an idea. So, yeah, I think. Thanks for that, Ben. I'm going to share with the team and see if we can get some insightful data from that. So yeah, I don't know, any parting thoughts, Ben? Any, or you want to summarize the takeaways again for people to go away with something that they can action on?
Yeah, I mean, if there was a parting thought, if you have a lot of content, before you start building that next piece, it's a good idea to think about where you currently are now. So um, don't just get focused on the next piece of content. Think about where it fits into your greater pie, your greater puzzle. And if there's one piece of advice I would say is like get a picture of your whole entire content inventory.
Okay, awesome, Ben. Thanks again for joining us. Ben, where can people find you and find 43?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Ben Dankyu, or on Twitter on Ben_Dankyu. And I'm also creating content, launching things on Nav43. So check us out, nav43.com.
Yeah, so Now 43 is an amazing SEO focused agency. We work with them very closely, help them create content and more. You can always come to crowd content as well if you want to create exceptional content at a scale with very, very high quality. So again, thanks everybody for joining us today, and I hope you got to enjoy this webinar. So until next time.